So I just wanted to address something that cropped up with the 80th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. I was watching a news report on Al Jazeera, and they repeated the lie that the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki caused the Japanese to surrender. This is a complete fabrication. This is typical of Western lies in that you are told it through the news media, you're told it in primary and secondary education if it comes up. Then if you do an undergraduate course, you might hear that it's in fact a controversy. And then if you actually look into it at that stage, you find out it's not really a controversy at all. It's just a complete lie. So the main things about the lie are that the Japanese already wanted to surrender. The barrier for them to surrendering was the main barrier. That's not the only thing, but the main barrier was that they wanted guarantees over the safety of the emperor and that he would not be prosecuted for war crimes or humiliated or any other such thing because his status was religious. So this was of great concern to many of the Japanese leaders. The US instead decided to stick to the Allied agreement to go for unconditional surrender. Now, this was a formula used for important diplomatic reasons in the war against Germany. By demanding unconditional surrender, they could help assure the Soviets, and likewise they were assured about the Soviets that there would be no separate peace, with one party or another seeking terms that they found acceptable. By going for unconditional surrender, they managed to maintain unity and were able to feel secure in throwing themselves into the war as fully as possible. So there was no similar rationale for Japan. So in insisting on unconditional surrender and not even informally giving assurances over the sanctity of the emperor, the US was effectively creating a barrier to the surrender of the Japanese. The Japanese were in absolutely dire condition. They had known for years that they weren't going to win the war. They were attempting to, for a long time, to force the US to come to favourable terms by making them pay a cost. But very soon after the bombing of Nagasaki, the Soviet Union entered the war, and that was in fact what pushed them to simply go, well, we're not even going to get the concession over the safety of the emperor, so we will just surrender because there is no hope. And of course, when they did surrender, the US promptly gave them that assurance that they'd been seeking all along. So the state that Japan was in was completely unviable at this point. Apart from the major damage to their cities and so forth, one of the real problems they had was with transportation. Although a lot of the Allied bombing had concentrated on attacking the civilian population, they had also taken out a lot of the rail infrastructure, although they could have taken out more, and the fuel shortages had crippled coastal shipping. So in a country like Japan, which is long, thin, there's lots of coastline and so forth, the distances are relatively magnified for the landmass, and this was making life, making the production of war material and so forth nearly impossible. So they were on the verge of collapse anyway. Even feeding people was getting increasingly difficult, and of course a lot of kids and so forth had to go from the cities out to farms to work, which was a way also of getting them to where food was. So the whole country had been mobilised to the point of mobilised and worked to the point of exhaustion. So they were ready to collapse. They were ready to surrender. And the final straw was, in fact, the Soviets entering the war, because it just, there was no way that they could even put pressure on the US to give them better terms. So, they did, in fact, launch a deadly attack late in the war, I think against Saipan, something like that, but that was it. That was their last hurrah. So when the bombs happened, it didn't have the impact that people claim it had on Japan, partly because they had actually had worse effects from other bombings, such as the firebombing of Tokyo, which killed more people and did more damage. And the other thing was that the US, what they'd done is they created 3 bombs, and they tested one, and as soon as it had been tested, they immediately crated up and shipped off the other 2 to be used as soon as possible in a great rush. And then they used one and then used the other one within a few days. So they basically deliberately used up all of the bombs they had. Truman would claim that would tell the Japanese, we have dozens more of these and so forth, but the Japanese didn't believe it. Their intelligence said rightly that was all the bombs that the US had of that sort, all the atomic weapons that they had. So it wasn't effective for the Japanese. And they didn't realise the extent of the destruction at that stage either. It took quite a while for them to really come to grips with how bad the bombings were. So it didn't play a role in their decision making at all. Now, it really, the fact is, it boggles the mind that 80 years later we're still telling this lie that it caused the Japanese to surrender, when we have so much evidence otherwise. It shows how sickeningly brainwashed our society is, quite frankly. But also, I think it's a cover for the real story, and the real story is bloody awful, because everything seems to indicate that the US absolutely gratuitously chose to take these bombs and use them to create as many deaths as possible, deliberately. Neither bomb was used as a demonstration in a non-populated area, which was a proposal that was made. No, they made sure that both bombs were used with as much intensity as possible, and the only reason that Nagasaki did not kill a lot more people was because it fell in the wrong valley. So they tried to maximize the number of deaths as what seems to have been a form of demonstration. They then, afterwards, I think it was afterwards, they made up the figure of 1 million dead. 1 million US soldiers would die invading Japan. And there was no need to invade Japan before the surrender. So what happened was exactly what would have happened without nuclear bombs. There was not, if the Japanese were out of the ability to fight and create casualties on against the US, and once the Soviets had entered the war, there was nothing they could do in Northeast Asia either. It was simply a matter of time, and not a lot of time, before the Red Army would just sweep them away, So there was no threat to the US. The Japanese were going to surrender at some stage, and then the US would occupy them, just as they ended up doing. The atomic weapons were of no relevance to that. They were simply an absolutely disgusting, gratuitous act of mass murder by fanatics who were already gearing up for what they saw as the coming war with the communist world. So yeah, that's the story we should be telling, and I think just remember that when you hear about the horrors of Hiroshima and the apologies from those people who say that it had the beneficial effect of ending the horrible war that was going on. It didn't. It was just the first two acts of despicable mass murder.